But yeah, Zach, do you want to get into this breaking point segment? Like I said, it's a bit of a debate between Krystal and Saagar over the recent charges that Kamala Harris is a DEI appointment, right? A DEI vice president.
Actual thing, I would just let it be. I mean, look, like I said, when we've got Trump on the ticket too, let's all call it even.
I mean, this guy's argument that he made on Fox Business, which I've seen made, he's not the only one. This is being made, online incessantly. The DEI thing obviously is being made by members of Congress and op-ed writers and whatever. Like, his argument about her is that she's black and she's a whore. Like, again, if that's where you want to go with this, good luck. Because the other thing is, part of how you know this is not an effective attack is Trump is not engaged in any of this.
Bro, I love how Krystal just lays it out there. She's like, bro, if you want to run the campaign of smearing a super qualified woman as a dumb whore who's black, and you think the people are going to fall for that in the year of our Lord 2024, I've been disappointed by people a lot in this country. A lot. But God damn it, I don't think I have to be that disappointed in them. That's not going to be an effective sales pitch. People want more from that, even if it's only selfish. Like, hey, what are you going to do for me, pal? That's just a cheap shot at the lady running against you. And we both know you have to run for something, not against something. But we can keep playing it, Gavin. Sorry, I reached into your sticks. Oh, you're good.
But here's the thing.
I'd be curious to see what he says.
Here's the thing, though, Saagar. Like, let me put my moralizing aside, because I do think this is a disgusting thing to say about anyone. And I think the DEI thing too, we'll I'm sure talk more about this, but whatever original like good faith critique of DEI programs that existed, which I share some of, by the way, like it's clearly just become a term for a slur for like a black person with a job. And that's the way it's been used typically. But the bigger problem with both the Haktua thing and the DEI thing is it reveals this like super niche, overly online type of brain. That was why Vivek didn't do well in his campaign. It was why Ron DeSantis didn't do well in his campaign, because they had these like niche online fixations, including a bizarre terminology that wouldn't even be familiar to most Americans. Like, to the extent that most Americans would know the term DEI, it would be like black people who find it to be basically a slur, black people who were increasingly open to a Republican message, by the way, or people.
And by the way, this is so true. I just wanted to say in the midterms of 2022, a lot of people talk about how obviously abortion was the main reason why the red wave didn't really materialize and the Democrats did a lot better than they were expected to. But something else that Zach and I talked a lot about that I think really contributed to that as well was the fact that all these Republicans ran on freakish culture war platforms. Remember how much they made front and center like trans people in sports and stuff? Like here in Missouri, candidates for Senate and Congress were routinely running ads where the main message of the ad on TV was trans people in sports.
It was the only time they'd ever been to a girls' sporting event for athletics.
And it's like, you really think that's what your average American cares about? Like that might appeal to some people who obviously are already going to vote for Republican candidates. They're obviously not up for grabs by Democrats, but like outside of motivating that small percentage to the polls, it's just turning off most normie Americans. And I think that the whole DEI thing, there's always a 3-letter word, right? CRT, DEI, whatever, right? I think that falls into the exact same category as the trans people in sports conversation, where it's like anyone who's going to be motivated by those talking points is already 100% voting Republican. You're not broadening the appeal.
It's not swing state rhetoric. Absolutely. Yep. It's not an argument and it's not compelling. You're right. Those are culture war, content is basically for people like us to indulge in, right? Yeah. Whatever the left's equivalent of culture war beefing, that's what we do. The lowest of the rung in media. What people want at the high level of American politics is a promise of what you could do, even if it's bullshit, right? Even if you're not going to do it. Like, tell them you're going to build a wall. I think that's one of the most disgusting, odious, un-American thing. I love when Jesse Ventura came on our show and was like, I'll build you a wall, but tear down the Statue of Liberty because you don't deserve it anymore. And I'm like, well, that's a fucking way to put it, man. He was like, I know why they don't want a wall that's going across Canada. Don't you? Yeah, it's white people that live in Canada. It's brown people that live in Mexico. I've been to both places. way harder to cross the border in one direction. You know what I mean? Like, give them a promise, regardless of how ridiculous it is.
And the other reason why I think that you're right, Christian, about them overplaying this DEI nonsense stuff is that I think what Kamala Harris and the Democrats can do here is something quite deft in that they can actually just kind of shut up about culture war stuff and all the sort of PC issues that people expect them to talk about. If they are able to focus mostly on abortion, mostly on like just economic issues and inflation, and not play into the Republicans' hands here, then it's going to be perfect, because Republicans are just going to project all of their racism and all of their bigotry onto Kamala because she's a black woman. So they're going to say, oh, she's the woke candidate, right? But then the American voters are going to be like, what do you mean? She's not actually talking about that many woke issues. She's not leaning into identity politics to the extent that the GOP is pretending that she's leaning into identity politics. Now, we'll see. Maybe Kamala will run a campaign where she totally does lean into that sort of cringy, like 2014, 2015 era identity politics, but I don't think she will. I think she's going to be more smart than that. And I don't think that she's just going to run a whole campaign about, like, you know, inclusion and diversity and those sorts of liberal buzzwords. I think they're going to be more smart than that. So, like I said, what could easily happen is the Republicans just project all of that onto the candidate, onto the Harris campaign, even though she's actually running a pretty issues-based focus campaign on stuff like abortion, not constantly talking about feminism and issues like that the Republicans desperately wish that she was.
Great point. Let's go ahead and hear a little bit more from Krystal and Saagar.
People are just like, what are you, I don't even know what that means. Like, what are you even talking about? So that's why Trump he never talked about ESG. He never talked about DEI. He made fun of the fixation on wokeness because he saw it for being this like overly niche online concern that doesn't land for normie Americans. So outside of the fact that I think there are certain demographic groups that will find this type of language and tech repellent, I also think it's just like way too online.
I'm not willing to go there on DEI yet, because DEI is a term that actually means something. Now, personally, I would not use DEI. I would just say affirmative action, which is far more accurate and I think correct about who she is and about why she was picked for the vice president, etc. But that is like, I don't know. Let's think of a leftist equivalent where just because somebody has used the term improperly, does that mean that you just stop and it's become publicly defined or used as something else? Does that mean you give up on the term? Like, I don't think so. I mean, DEI is a real thing. It basically means affirmative action for minority groups. It embodies the whole equity versus equality. And that's a mindset and philosophy that Kamala believes in, including putting out equity cartoons. So calling her...
I don't know if Saagar is being so intentionally obtuse, like freakishly dense right here, as if he doesn't know that the entire party, which he speaks on behalf of largely, has adopted DEI as an explicit dog whistle for race, so much so that it is just dead in the water as a expression that can be used to recruit normie voters. Because whether or not he likes it, whether or not he is willing to accept that it is now poison in the minds of every sane person in America and just a dog whistle for, as Krystal put it bluntly, a black person with a dog, he's still prepared to die on the Hill. I thought that was interesting.
It is interesting. Yeah, I think that Saagar is one of those right wingers who is in kind of a bubble of other right wingers who really fancy themselves like intellectual and all this stuff. So, you know, they're like, oh, when we're talking about this, we're making a real case about affirmative action. They're not understanding the way that the vast majority of right wingers are using those terms and talking points and dog whistles, frankly. So there's a bit of out of touchness going on. I'm genuinely not sure if it's like, you know, intentional, like if he really doesn't know that people are straight up just being racist and basically just subbing out the N word for DEI when they're calling people like
thug.
Yeah, exactly. And like there was a Republican representative earlier who was like, you know, talking about Kamala, and he was like, you know, the DEI spokesperson introducing the DEI vice president. She was talking about Karine Jean-Pierre and Kamala Harris. So it literally is just anyone who's black with a job is only there because of DEI. Like that's literally what they use it as.
Her DEI candidate is empirically true. She was picked for her race. She was picked because she was a black woman. If you look back at the time, Amy Klobuchar, Gretchen Whitmer, and her were on the final list. BLM madness was happening, Jim Clyburn says, you got to pick a black lady. And he picked a black lady, even though he didn't like her. And she wasn't all that politically effective and failed in the primary. That is literally DEI.
Here's what I would say.
Yeah.
The vice presidential pick is almost by definition a DEI pick. Joe Biden was put on the ticket with Barack Obama because he's a white dude. Like you're always picked. I mean, what are we talking about with regard to who Kamala will pick? We're like,
why did Donald Trump pick Mike Pence? Because of his religion, right? If his religion was Islam, they would call it a DEI hire. Instead, it's crazy, batshit evangelical Christianity, who's the party, or the individuals the Republican Party.
Trying to imagine Donald Trump picking a Muslim,
right? But you know what I'm saying, right?
It's gonna be a white guy.
Yes.
Is that a DEI?
Yes,
pick?
that's my point.
But here's the thing,
when you get picked for your race, that is
Saagar,
DEI.
here's the thing.
Yeah.
None of these people, and you, by the way, too, you would never talk about them that way. You would never use the term DEI to describe them, even though they're also being picked for their race or other demographic characters. Mike Pence picked because he's an evangelical with, ties into that community. No one called him a DEI pick. And that goes to my point of what this has come to mean, whatever you might mean when you say it, what it has come to mean is a black person with a job.
Okay.
And remember how they used it with the Baltimore mayor, right?
Sure.
I don't remember exactly what she's referencing with the Baltimore mayor, but I'm sure she makes a banging point there.
Yeah, I forget, something happened in Baltimore. Maybe
the bridge collapse.
I was going to say, I think it was the bridge collapse,
and they blamed it on the fact that the guy was black.
Yeah,
Imagine the audacity.
Right. Complete stupidity.
What horseshit. This is what the Republican Party has to offer. That's why it's so embarrassing. It's so humiliating when the Democrats lose. It's like you can't even put up a better alternative than that.